Welcome back to Dear Diary, my infertility series. If my eyes look a little red, I promise I did not just smoke weed, because I don't smoke no weed or do any other drugs. I don't even drink alcohol. But I was crying. I was just in full on tears. And I had to ask myself, were these happy tears, sad tears? Like, what were the tears for? And I could not fully answer the question, but I think sometimes when you just think back on life and think back through some of the things that you have been through, that you have made it through, and then even some of the things that you have been going through and still in it, sometimes it will bring you to tears. But tears is a wonderful thing, because tears is actually a way of releasing stress, trauma, emotions, and all of that can affect your hormones if you're holding it in and not letting it out. So the tears happened today. I did not expect it, but it did. So let's go ahead and get into what today's talk is about. But before I do, let me tell y'all a story that just happened yesterday, and it kind of cracked me up. I have not responded yet, but yesterday on my IG, I made a post and it had like what I did from the time I woke up to about 12 noon. And I wrote it out. I wrote out what I was going to say. So the voiceover said, "This is how I start my day as a 40-plus-year-old former mom on a mission to conceive while having hormonal imbalances, including low cortisol, fatigue, adrenals, and a host of other healing opportunities." Well, someone said former mom, and they put a question mark behind that, basically saying, what do you mean by that? I saw the post, but I did not get a chance to answer. And then a little bit later, I seen someone else respond, and they said she used to be a mom and now she's not anymore. Come on now, dig deeper. And then underneath that post, there was another post, and somebody had responded to the first person and said, I was just about to ask that question myself. And I was so appreciative to the person who answered the question, because some of this is simplistic, y'all. If someone said, I am a former athlete, a former ball player, former president, former nurse, you would not say, what do you mean by former? But the fact that I said former mom, there was this whole question about it, like, what do you mean? But the person responded. I didn't get a chance to respond. I still haven't yet, but today I promise I will respond to all three of the comments. I think sometimes we have to be careful when we are so heavily opinionated about things that we haven't been through. Since losing my son over 20 years ago, I have had so many people say to me, once a mom, always a mom. I think sometimes we just say things that we have heard people say before, or things that sound cliche-ish, or even things that we hear and we like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But what makes sense logically does not always match up and line up with the heart. Let me give you an example. If a widow who lost her husband was going through it emotionally, mentally, you probably would not say to that widow, once a wife, always a wife. And even with me saying that, you might feel like, obviously, but you would say that to a mother who has lost a child. You would say, once a mom, always a mom, but change out the scenario and it changes everything. I don't know about anyone else because I have never asked, but I can tell you, as a mother who has lost her only child, her only born child, that once a mom, always a mom doesn't even make sense. I understand in theory I understand it, but emotionally it makes no sense. Okay? And I don't want you to be in my shoes, so don't try to think too hard to figure it out, and I think that there is really a difference in between a person who has lost a child that still has a living child or living children than a person who has lost their only child. It's different. The level of confusion, the level of pain on certain holidays like Mother's Day, Christmas, their birthday, everything is just so different when you have lost your only born child. Okay? Now, I didn't even jump on here to talk about that, but the moment I hit record, it was right there. I was going to talk about this part right here because I thought it was funny. I thought her saying, come on now, dig deeper. That cracked me up. But I did not intend to get into the rest of that. But I did, so here we are. Let me share with you why I had tears earlier, and it was not centered around that. I was just thinking about the journey. First of all, let me say, I told you last week Friday that either this week Friday or either the following Friday, which will be next Friday, that I will have secured a fertility coach, specialist, or doctor. And today is Friday. And I have officially made the decision. But let me tell you what happened first. I guess I got a lot to share with you today. And I hope this whole talk does not take over longer than about 25 minutes. I'm going to try to give you the quick and short stories. So last week when I had this conversation with you with my Dear Diary series, I had narrowed it down to two people, two different doctors, and they were both doctors, but holistic doctors. One of them was a fertility specialist, like 100%, that's what she does, all things fertility. And she works with couples. She will not just work with just the woman. She works with both partners. And if your partner is not willing to do the work with you, then she's not going to coach or work with you, because she works with the male and the female. Well, my husband is down for the journey. I think some of the meetings he would have definitely missed some of the conversations because he's busy. He don't have time to be at all these meetings, but he's down for the journey. Well, the second person, she is she's like a period doctor. So that means she fully understands hormones. And she has definitely helped a lot of women with fertility. So I was caught in between the two of them, like, which one should I go with? But there was still a part of me that was just like, are they the right fit? Is she the right one? Is she the right one? Like, what do I do? And I was very confused as to which one to actually go with. Okay, I was very confused. There were a lot of pros to both of them. And then I did have some minor cons. Well, I had been praying all week and just asking God to just help me to make the right decision. I'm like, I'm not 30 anymore. I'm not 32. I'm in my 40s. The clock is definitely about to tick out. Like, this is probably my last rodeo to get this thing right. So help me to choose the right person. Let me tell you what happened. So the other day, was on my Instagram page, and this one particular doctor had responded to one of my posts. And I was like, oh, I haven't seen her post in a while. And I clicked on her page, and immediately everything in me was like, she's the one. And what I did next is I dropped in her comments. I didn't even go to the DM. I dropped in her comments on one of her posts and said, do you currently work with fertility clients? And she said, yes, I do. And so then I dropped in her DM, and I had a series of questions for her, and she had a series of answers for me. And let me tell you what sealed the deal for me. First of all, she is my pick. She is my choice. What sealed the deal for me was not just how she answered the questions. It was me explaining to her, okay, I am 100% plant-based, and I do not waver on that. And I just want to make sure that whoever I go with, that they respect my dietary lifestyle. And she responded and said, oh, she was like, that's great, because I'm plant-based too. What? At that moment, now she had already checked off all the other boxes. But when we got to that point, I was like, oh, that's it. And I just had to pause and be like, thank you, God. And for the first time, it was the first time that I had made a decision, like, okay, this is the person. And I just felt at peace with it. Because the other two people, one of the ladies, I was like, okay, yeah, she's my person. But I didn't feel at peace with it. And then even the second person, I didn't feel at peace with it. And so now that I'm like, okay, she's the one, I feel completely at peace. And even today, I sent her a message and was like, okay, I still had 2 more questions. I had 2 more final questions for her. And she answered both of the questions in ways that made me say, okay, yeah, this is definitely it. And then I responded to her and said, okay, you're it. You're my pick. how do we get started? So, yay! Because I cannot do this on my own anymore. Even though I have been to a lot of specialists, I've been to iridologists, kinesiologists, Chinese medicine doctors, functional medicine doctors. I have been to gynecologists, holistic gynecologists, reproductive endocrinologists. I have been to just like, did I say gynecologists too? Because I've had an array of gynecologists. I've had all of these different specialists that I have worked with, but I have not had anybody that was going to work with me from a coaching perspective, right? And so she is a medical doctor that practices from a functional and integrative perspective, and she is plant-based, and fertility is part of what she does. So it just seems like a win-win. And even from a price point, her price points are better for me. One of the doctors, I didn't like this about her package. One of the doctors, and which her package was not overly expensive, because the first person I ever consulted with, she was $15K. I really wanted to work with her, but $15K? I just couldn't make sense out of the $15K. So the next person was $7K, right? She was like a little over $7K. And I was better with that price. But the issue that I had with the price is, by the time I got on the call with her, discovered her, got on the call with her, I had just finished paying for $4,000 worth of testing. $4,000. And so the doctor that had the 7K package, some of her testing included some of the tests I had just done. I already got these results. At least 4 of the tests that you say that you do, I just got the results. Like, here they are. I just finished doing these testings in like the last 90 days. And she was like, oh, okay, that's great. We can still use those, but my package is still my package. And what we'll do at the end, we'll just go ahead and retest for these things. And I'm like, well, in your original package, were you going to test in the beginning and then test at the end? She was like, no. And I'm like, so we can't just take off the difference? We just can't just take off $1,000 or $1,500 or $800 based off of the test that I've already done that you have to order? And she was like, no, my package doesn't work that way. I didn't like that. The new doctor that I'm about to work with was like, oh, okay, so yeah, we don't have to order this test, that test, this test, or that test. I like that. Definitely like that, amongst a few other things. So again, yay! I feel so happy that now I'm going to have support and have somebody to guide me in this fertility part of the journey, okay? Yeah. Yep. Now, that's not even why I was crying. I'm about to tell you not why I was crying. So I was out on the patio, just getting in some fresh air, doing some deep breathing, and just reflecting. And I thought about the last 10 years and what this infertility journey has been like. And it led me to thinking about the first time I got an HSG, a histocell, which is basically a test that determines if your fallopian tubes are open or closed. And I would imagine most doctors working with fertility would call in that test for you, right? They need to know, are your tubes open or closed? Because it makes no sense to do all of the work if you have blocked fallopian tubes. So anyways, I go in and I get this test done. And the way they do the test, it's like an x-ray type of machine, and they put you on the table as if you're getting a pap smear. Then they put something like some type of catheter inside of your vagina, and then they expand your cervix, and then the solution is supposed to go up through your cervix inside of your uterus, and it's supposed to fall out your fallopian tubes. The liquid is, and this is how they determine if your fallopian tubes are open or if they are blocked. Well, the first time I went into the hospital, and normally this is done at a hospital. The first time I went into the hospital to get this test done, the doctor could not get the catheter all the way in. So as he was trying to put the solution in, it just wouldn't do right, and it was extremely painful, and we had to pull the plug on the test, and I still had to pay $1,500 out of pocket. $1,500 for a test that I didn't even get results for. Well, he decided to refer me to a reproductive endocrinologist. And so I went to the reproductive endocrinologist. Can you believe the exact same thing happened again? She could not get the catheter all the way in. She could not tell where the solution was going or not, because she couldn't secure the catheter. Still had to pay another $1,500 out of pocket. So at this point, it's like within a 60-day time frame, I have just paid $3,000 and I still don't have an answer. Now, this is where the tears came about. The third time that I had to get the test, the same reproductive endocrinologist that did the test for the second time, now this is the third time that I'm getting it. And she's like, okay, so what we're gonna do differently is I'm going to have you use this certain prescription, and the prescription is going to dilate your cervix, so that way we don't have a problem getting the tube in, the catheter in, so that way we can make sure that we get a result. And so I said, okay. And I was excited about it, because who wants to pay another $1,500 and go through that type of discomfort just to, again, not know? And I need to know. I need to know. She needs to know. We need to know. Are my tubes open or are they blocked? So the requirements for this particular med is that you had to insert it before you went to bed. Now, I was going to bed early that night because my test the next day was like early in the morning. I want to say it was like 8 a.m. or something. So I inserted the pill. It was like a little, it looked like something you can swallow. It was a little pill. And I inserted it, got in the bed. And about an hour later, I'm having what feels like Braxton Hicks, like these little mild type of pains. It kind of felt like a contraction a little bit. Within about 2 hours, I was full on into deep pain. I felt like I was in labor. By about the third hour, I am having chills, so I'm getting cold. And so I'm putting the blanket on. Then I'm getting hot and I'm burning up. I have a fever. At some point, I was so cold and my body was hurting so bad. My husband had to pick me up and put me in the bathtub. He had ran bath water for me. He literally had to undress me, put me in the bathtub. And about 2 minutes of being in the water, I got so hot, I was burning up and I had no strength, no energy. I literally had to crawl out the tub. I crawled out the tub and I was on the floor in the bathroom and realized that I had to use the bathroom. So I make it to the bathroom and I start vomiting. So I'm vomiting. And in the midst of vomiting, I realized I had to use the bathroom. Then I'm having diarrhea. And then it comes out from that end. And then I'm vomiting again. So I'm sitting on the toilet and I'm holding a trash can. I'm vomiting and having diarrhea at the exact same time. It was a nightmare. Eventually, I got back to the bed, but I was in so much pain. I was moaning the entire night. I got 0% rest. The next morning, I was so drained. I was fatigued. I was in excruciating pain. I called the doctor's office right at the cusp of 7 o'clock and was like, okay, I'm supposed to have this 8 o'clock HSG. There's no way I can make it. I'm in so much pain. I could barely breathe. And the receptionist was like, don't waste it. Still come in, don't waste it. And so I was like, okay, all right. So I pulled myself together and we went to the hospital and they were able to insert the catheter in. It was very painful, but they were able to insert it in and they were able to run all the fluid and it did what it was supposed to do. And the doctor looked at me and said, I'm sorry, but both of your fallopian tubes are blocked. This is where I cried earlier. I just remembered feeling so hopeless. I remember feeling so broken. And when I walked out of the doctor's office, I had to go through the waiting room. And it's like all these other people in there waiting for whatever they were doing that day at the infertility office. And I looked at my husband and I think he already knew. And I was like, okay, come on, let's go. And so we leave. And when we get in the parking lot, I'm just walking. Rashawn's behind me and I'm walking. I'm just walking like a zombie, but like a fast zombie. And Rashawn just grabbed my hand and he was like, stop. Whew. He was like, stop. And he stopped me and he just held me. And I cried so hard. It just felt like none of this was supposed to be the story. The story was not supposed to be that Tina had lost her one and only child, and then she turned around and got married some 8 years later or whatever the time frame was, and then now she's dealing with infertility. That was not supposed to be the story. I was so sad, so sad. Anyways, before I left the doctor's office, the doctor's suggestion to me was, well, what we can do is we can remove your fallopian tubes and we can do IVF. And I was looking at her and I'm like, nah, I ain't gonna be able to do that. I literally told her, I'm not gonna be able to do that. Because to me, that was too much like being a science project. I didn't want my fallopian tubes removed because that means I'm taking God out of the equation. And anytime I wanna have a baby, I gotta fall up in this thing. Let me blow my nose with my bamboo tissue. Woo. Child, we done made a mess today. Whew, but it feels good though. So anyways, I'm just like, no, we're not gonna be able to do the tube removal thing. It's not even gonna work. So I left up out of there so motivated to heal my body. I was doing the work, the womb work of healing, the life work of healing. And I went back to the doctor 9 months later because I had to get yet another HSG. And this particular day, my doctor was not able to do my HSG because she had surgery that day. So she was upstairs in another part of the hospital doing surgery. And here I am, I walk into the hospital and I'm about as nervous as could be. Another $1,500. So now we talking $6,000 worth of HSG. So I walk up in there and I meet the new doctor that has to do the HSG that day. I get on the table and she's having small talk with me, trying to keep me uplifted. I think she probably understands, period, A, how uncomfortable that procedure is. And then B, I'm sure she probably looked at my charts and seen that I had failed, what would you even say? Failed fallopian tube openings. Does that even sound right? Let's just say she probably seen that my fallopian tubes are blocked, okay? And here I was back. So I remember her just being like super positive and just kind of having fun conversations with me. And I was responding back, but at the same time, I was in my head like, okay, Tina, if the results come back negative, if they come back that the tubes are still blocked, you're gonna be okay. This is the conversation I'm having with myself. You're gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. And I remember my doctor's face lightening up as she was looking at the screen. And she was like, oh my God. She like, I cannot see your left tube because your uterus is tilted today. She was like, but look at this. She was like, the fluid is overflowing from both ends. She was like, look at how much fluid is coming out of your right tube. She was like, you only need one tube to get pregnant. She was like, and the amount of fluid that's leaving out of your uterus, I'm convinced that your left tube is open too. And I remember feeling so grateful and happy and excited. It was like God heard me. And in the midst of all the excitement, still while everything was going on down there, because the doctor had not pulled the catheter and stuff out, my doctor, Dr. Desiree, walked into the room. She had been notified. She let me know that the nurse had notified her that my tubes were open, and she came downstairs and gave me a high five. She was so excited. She was so excited. And she was like, okay. She was like, now that we have open fallopian tubes, we can just do an IUI. We don't have to do IVF, and we certainly don't have to remove your tubes. And I remember looking at her like, nah, bro, I'm about to go ahead and get pregnant naturally. And there was still no natural pregnancy. There was still no pregnancy. Going back, would I have done IUI had I known that I would be here and still no pregnancy? I don't know. I ask myself that sometimes. But if I'm gonna go back and wish something, okay, just in case you're like, well, what's IUI? So IVF is basically, it's two different things. IVF is when they do a procedure, and first of all, before they even do the procedures, they have to boost your body up with all of these medications, all these drugs to make your ovaries overproduce eggs. And then they go in and they retrieve eggs. Okay, this is what they do in IVF. So they go in and they retrieve the eggs. And then they take the male semen and they put the eggs and they put the semen together and they create embryos. And then at some point they end up putting several of those embryos inside of your uterus. And the goal is that at least one or two of them will actually take. Some of them end up dying off. So that's IVF. IUI is more about taking the male semen and putting it up closer to your fallopian tube area, so that way it's easier for the semen and the egg to meet. Okay, so that's kind of the short ways to explain the difference in between IUI and IVF. Now, going back, would I have done IUI? I don't know, because it's still meds and stuff you gotta do, and I'm just not really the med kind of girl. Man, we over the 25 mark. I just looked at the time, but guess what? You still here and I'm still here, so we gonna proceed. My bad on that. So anyways, what if we're gonna go back and use an imagination on what I would have done or what I could have done? I wish that I would have known about hormone doctors back then. Not from a reproductive Western way of teaching and thinking, but from like a holistic perspective, from like an Eastern perspective. I wish I would have known about this. What I'm learning about now, and these doctors that now I'm having access to and being able to make a choice in between technically 4 different doctors, boy, I wish I would have known about that then. Because I could have healed myself then, right? And then got the babies, maybe 2. I probably wouldn't have wanted more than 2, but I could have got the babies and we could have been on to life. But here's part of the story that I wanted to share. Sometimes some people, including you, might have to go through more than other people. Sometimes you have to go through more than other people. And there's always going to be a reason as to why. Okay? In my journey of healing myself, I have had 3 different rounds of fibroids. The first time I was diagnosed with fibroids, I had 5 fibroids, eliminated all 5 of them. The second time, I got a large fibroid inside of my uterus that I didn't even know that I had until I was on day 27 of a 28-day detox, and that bad boy came out in my sleep, and it was massive. It had imploded itself, but it was massive. It was a mess. And then the third time I got a fibroid, it was 13 centimeters, the size of a sweet potato, shrunk it down to half the size in 45 days and got stuck right there. And it's like, why am I stuck here? I'm doing what I did the first time. I'm doing what I did the second time. I'm doing the same work that I'm teaching my customers and clients to do. And I'm watching them eliminate fibroids, get pregnant, have healthy babies. I'm watching some of them, they done having babies, but they're shrinking and eliminating fibroids, and I'm stuck right here. Well, it has sent me into this whole new journey where it is including doctors, where it is including in-depth research and all sorts of things, so that way I can understand. And I understand things about fibroids now that I didn't understand a year ago, 2 years ago. And so sometimes you gotta go deeper because of the demand that's on your life. You gotta go deeper because it's part of your life's work, it's part of your legacy. So the point in all this today is stay 10 toes down. Stay doing the work. I don't care if it's been 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 20 years. Stay doing the work. It's part of your legacy. All right? See you next week. Bye.